Welcome back to my YouTube channel for another battle report. This time it's going to be Vampire Covenant against the Beast Herds. And at the moment that I'm releasing this video, we're actually playing the Alliance Open Tournament. The lists that you will see are going to be lists that are actually used at the event. So my opponent in this game is an opponent who is also participating, and he wanted still to playtest his list against some list of the tournament that was going to be present at the tournament. So I chose this Vampire Covenant list of Daniel Alfring. He's running the following list that you can see in the screen. So he has 3 different vampire characters, all of them on Monstrous Revenants. It's a Brotherhood of the Dragon bloodline list, and it fills up the rest of the points with just the core points and ghouls and skeletons mostly. And then the support is just some Spectral Hunters and Vampire Knights. It's quite a easy to read list on paper, at least. So you have the 3 vampire characters. The Count, he has the Death Cheater for a regen. And he also has the Eternity Gem, so he has a 2-up Aegis against the first wound suffered. And multiple wounds are always reduced to 1 wound, I believe. Then the Vampire Courtier, the first one, is the Battle Standard Bearer, and he has Basalt Infusion for a nice 1-up armor save in the end, I think. The Plate Armor gives him 4-up, 3-up for the shield, 2-up actually only for the Basalt Infusion. And then the third one is a Vampire Courtier, also with Plate Armor, also with a shield, but with Ghostly Guard, so against non-magical attacks he has a 1-up armor save. With the mobility of the list, you'll probably be able to find matchups where the Ghostly Guard is going to be useful. So you'll often end up with a 1-up armor save, or at least against shooting, and then in combat if you go for paired weapons or a great weapon, you would lose a little bit of armor, but still be quite decently armored. So the magic in the list is quite limited, with only 1 Wizard Adept and 1 Wizard Apprentice. 2 Wizard Apprentices actually. So yeah, the Wizard Apprentices, they both have to have Occultism, as well as the Vampire Count, because they're Brotherhood of the Dragon. Likely you will not choose Pentagram of Pain on them, even though you actually might, depending on the matchup. But I think he's going to go at least twice with the Dead, with an Arise spell to be able to heal his pieces. But even then, the Arise spell is not going to be that effective because, well, most things in the army will only have a reanimation value of 1, like the heroes and the Vampire Knights and the Spectral Hunters and the Phantom Hosts. So you'll not be raising a lot of models in this army. I think it mostly relies on just the 3 characters that together have to do the heavy lifting of the army. And I don't know if it will be enough. So we'll go into the Beast Herd list to see what kind of matchup we have. So my opponent at the start of the battle was a bit concerned about the matchup, because with the Vampire Covenant single models you could specifically target his Minotaurs. Because the Beast Herd list mostly revolves around these 3 units of 6 Minotaurs, with the rest basically acting as support for these models to shine. So we have a Beast Lord, who's the general, with a Razor Tusk Chariot. He has Beast Axe, so he goes to defensive 8, I believe. So he's quite sturdy because he has a 2-up armor save in the end and a 5-up Aegis save, because of the talisman of shielding. And then you have a BSB Beast Chieftain, also on a Raiding Chariot, also with a Beast Axe, so he has defensive 7, I believe. They're both quite sturdy models to remove from the field. This all is backed up with Druidism, Wizard Master, just to be able to heal some wounds if your opponent does so, and also to be able to push a block of Minotaurs in your face turn 1, and either giving them regeneration or a +2 resilience, provided that you dispel the Oaken Throne. If you don't dispel the Oaken Throne, then the spells are going to be worse even. Yeah, so that is basically it. Yeah, place your bets and let's see what's going to happen. We played frontline clash with Spoils of War, so in the central line there's going to be 3 objectives for us to pick up with scoring units, and if you have 3 ranks or more you're not affected by picking up these tokens, but if you don't have as many ranks and you pick up a token, then you can't march for the rest, for the duration that you have the token. And at the end of the game we're going to see whoever has picked up the most tokens, and that person is going to score the secondary objective. So for deployment, my opponent was able to choose table sides, and then I made him deploy first. I didn't really know if I wanted to go first or second with this army, because normally with Vampire Covenant there's a tendency to appreciate going second, because in the first turn of your opponent can do some damage to your army, and then your reanimation spells are going to be more effective. However, in this army list my magic is not that strong anyway, and also my opponent doesn't have a lot of range damage output, even though with the druidism he is able to inflict some damage at range, but it's not really damage that I heavily worry about. I believe it's like d6 strength 4 hits or so that he can do somewhere. He can do it on a Monstrous Revenant if he wants to. You can also do it on the Phantom Host. I can't really be bothered. I mean, I still have 8 wounds on the units. I still have a Aegis save against d6 strength 4. So that's not really that important to me. So having your general on a monstrous mount does help quite a bit in deployment for the Vampire Covenant. I already saw that with my zombie dragon, that it enables you to play the Spectral Hunters and the Phantom Hosts way broader than you would normally be able to. So a lot of Vampire Covenant lists also include Dark Coaches for this purpose, because they provide a 6-inch March bubble. And this type of list with your Vampire on a Monstrous Mount or a Von Garstein Vampire, I don't think you really need a Dark Coach, because the March bubble is also accounted for at the moment that you want to march with your unit. So what you can do is that you first start with your dragon, your general on the left, fly him over to the right, and then move the unit on the right. So effectively your bubble is way bigger than just 18 inches. So this is the deployment that we end up with, and I have a +5 or so on the roll to go first. I vanguard up with my dogs on the left, and I basically spread out my entire army. I think maybe I shouldn't have put the BSB all the way on the right, because for me the advantage would be to get multiple characters, hopefully even all of them, into one single fight against the Minotaurs, because then I can deal a lot of damage at a concentrated space. Anyway, let's get into the battle itself. So we start with my turn 1. I move up the direwolves to be out of line of sight of my opponent's Minotaurs, so that they can later in the game still provide a function. My opponent's dogs, they are in a position where they prevent my opponent from being able to charge the Minotaurs full on into my Corche that I advance up on the left. So in this way, I believe only one Minotaur can come into contact, especially since the dogs, they also have to charge. My opponent has to maximize the models that are going to come into contact. So if he maximizes the dogs and has one Minotaur in combat, he can have one model in combat of the one Minotaur in combat and 3 wolves in combat. If he's going to try to put in a second Minotaur in combat, he's going to have only 1 dog in combat. So in the end, he can only have 3 models in total in combat, which means that he has to maximize with the dogs anyways. So there's, even if he manages to pull it off with the movement, he's still gonna have to put only 1 Minotaur in combat. With 3 dogs in contact and just only 1 Minotaur with support attacks, that's not going to be enough to grind out my Corche, because the damage output on the Corche is going to be high enough to reduce the wounds of the Minotaur block. So I'm quite confident about doing this. my opponent cannot make the wheel with the dire wolves to charge something else. He is going to come into contact with me, and this allows me to also threaten his lines from quite a aggressive position. Otherwise, on the right, I just advance up, so the ghouls, they stay behind the hill, but they on the right, they are able to look past a part of the hill, so that if my opponent moves up too aggressively, I can charge into minotaurs. And the ghouls, they have agility 4, so they go to agility 5 on the charge. They'll strike before the minotaurs, and then they'll be able to at least do some damage. So my idea is that I'm gonna have to sacrifice a couple of units to deal some initial damage to the minotaurs, and this is basically where the minotaurs shine. So any of my units can do some damage to the minotaurs, but when they're still at full health, just full blocks, I can't reliably take out any of the units with any of my units, just because I don't have enough offensive power. So the Vampire Knights, I didn't realize that they have the blood ties with the blood of the dragon, the Brotherhood of the Dragon. So they also have devastating charge plus 1 attack. I only thought they would have 2 attacks each on the charge, so that was a bit of a miscalculation by me. So that should have still been a good idea to just throw them in a bit more aggressively. And my opponent, he does go for the charge on the Corche with Minotaurs. So the advantage that he does have is that it's only one combat now going on, so he can focus with his magic onto the single combat. And I think this is also where the list of my opponent shines. So if you have only one unit in combat, you can focus your attention to that. And if your opponent manages to dispel all of this in a later stage of the game, then you're gonna be able to regrow some Minotaurs by using the spell of Druidism that allows you to raise some wounds. The Minotaurs, they're still just large models, so they regain 2 wounds, I think. But then with the attribute, it's 3 wounds. You can put back an entire Minotaur with just 1 casting of this spell. So that is really good, because 1 Minotaur in health points really makes a big difference. Against some lists with a lot of ranged output, my opponent might struggle if his opponent is gonna be able to pull out a couple of turns of shooting. But then in the list there's a lot of ambushers, so you have the Gores, the Wild Horns, that are 2 units of 15 guys. They can really deal with war machines and ranged troops very well. And you still have a unit of raiders, of mongrels, that can also deal with the unit. They can hold them up a little bit with their ranks. So we go into the combat, and my Corche actually performs quite well. My opponent's Minotaurs don't manage to inflict any wounds on me. So this is the model with the Ghostly Guard, so I believe I went for paired weapons still, so I go to a 4-up armor save. Maybe I should have just gone for a shield, but I just wanted to go for the offensive output. I was expecting to get 1 or 2 wounds. I just want to do as much damage as possible to these Minotaurs, because if I'm able to diminish them, I'm going to be able to diminish the offensive output of my opponent, and it's really important to me to do exactly that. So now it's my turn again. Seeing this back, had I thought about devastating charge on the Vampire Knights, I should have charged with the Vampire Knights on the right into the Minotaurs behind the hill. I don't actually, because I was thinking that I would only have 8 attacks. Instead, I do charge with my Phantom Host into the flank of the Minotaurs that charged my Corche. I do charge my Skeletons into the Mongol Raiders to give my opponent a little bit of an issue of just having an entire block of Skeletons breaking through his lines. And I position the ghouls on top of the hill just to be able to reduce the amount of offensive output that comes out of the Minotaurs of my opponent by reducing them in terms of wounds. I used the Vampire Knights on the right to shield my backlines, and I don't think this was really necessary. And even if it were necessary, I should have properly shielded off my skeletons from the longhorns that can still have a charge now in the back of my unit. And I measure it out, and my vampire lord, my count, is actually able to fly over my skeletons to the position on the right. This was also not really necessary, I think. My opponent can charge me in the back. He's going to have a rear charge. He's going to have a combat rest for charging. He's going to have 1 rank. So that's going to be a combat rest of 4. I should be able to inflict 4 casualties on his unit. So he would be able to hold me up for a turn, and that is what I was mostly afraid of. But I would still have been behind the hill. So I should probably just have advanced a little bit more on the left, knowing that my Phantom Hosts and the Courtier together were at least going to hold up my opponent's Minotaurs for an extra turn. I should have been careful in that situation for the Minotaurs in the top left, because there were some positions where my vampire count wouldn't have been able to go because of their presence. In combat, my opponent's Minotaur just they go to town onto my Phantom Hosts, and my vampire Courtier, he fluffs completely. So I only managed to do like 2 wounds to him or so. My opponent manages to do a couple of wounds to my Courtier and 4 wounds to my Phantom Hosts because I've rolled 4 ones on the Aegis save. So that was really unfortunate because I didn't get any bonuses out of charging in the flank there. Whilst I was counting on just getting a little bit of bonus out of it at least. So my opponent, he does manage to crumble down the Courtier. He doesn't manage to crumble fully down the Phantom Hosts though. So they are still alive and kicking, even though they're not gonna last for long probably. So yeah, what about the state of the board? On the left I was trying to just delay my opponent and just to force off the staring battle between my Vampire Knights and my opponent's Minotaurs. I was gonna advance towards the objective, pick it up, and hopefully just end it like that. So for me it would be a beneficial situation if we end up with a stalemate, basically, where I am just staring at him, he's just staring at me, and we do that for the rest of the game. Because my unit is actually less valuable, especially within the army, as his block of 6 Minotaurs. And I would have, in the end, the objective, and he wouldn't. So that would really be a big win for me. It alleviates the pressure on the rest of my list. My opponent has a feeling that he can't really advance. So as long as we don't resolve the charge between my Vampire Knights and his Minotaurs, we don't know the outcome, and that is really good for me. Because once I commit, my opponent is going to be going to gain the knowledge of what's going to come out of this situation, and he's going to be able to either remove his Minotaurs, that is true, but more likely he would just evaporate my Vampire Knights with all the strength 5 attacks that he has. Because even with devastating charge, I hit him on 3+, so that would be 8 hits, that would be like 6 wounds or so. Then you get 4 times 3, 12, 15, and 16 attacks back on the Vampire Knights. They're gonna likely reroll to hit, so that's gonna be 16 hits. It's gonna be 10 wounds. It's gonna be like 3 or 4 wounds. Yeah, something like that. So the turn after, I'll only have 2 Vampire Knights against his 6 remaining Minotaurs. He's gonna be steadfast, so he'll likely just stick. And then the turn after, he'll just finish the job, whilst I would be able to probably just remove 1 Minotaur. So my opponent could have advanced way more aggressively on the left flank, I think. What my opponent did in his turn was to charge in with the Minotaurs onto my ghouls on the hill together with his Beast Lord. So I didn't really see this coming, that he could combo charge and then maximize on his chariot. So that was a good move of my opponent, and I should have accounted for that. And otherwise he was still able to charge into the rear of my skeletons. I should also have prevented that. That was really easy to prevent. So that was really a dumb move of mine, actually. And on the right, all the way on the right, he charged in on my Spectral Hunters with his Centaurs. So in the previous turn, I did try to charge his Centaurs with my Spectral Hunters, and I failed on a 10 or 9. And in this turn, my opponent was able to make the charge. I think it's still a good charge for him to make, even though I have a 3-up Aegis save. But these Centaurs, they have so much attacks. They have like 15 attacks on the charge. That means that some of the attacks are going to go through, and in the end, the Spectral Hunters, I really like them in a unit of 10, because they're still only like 360 points, and then they can actually do something on the field. In units of 5, they're more useful for just some terror charges, because they don't have any sweeping attacks. They just have their 3-up Aegis. They are a cavalry type unit, so they don't really have a lot of ranks. They don't feature that many attacks actually. Or well, they have 2 attacks each with offensive 3 and strength 5, 8 to 10. So that is quite nice, but the offensive 3 always has the effect of only hitting like 3 times, and then the unit only does 2 wounds, or even 1 wound, as demonstrated in this case. Yeah, so my opponent went in with the Minotaurs on the ghouls, and he completely removed them. That was a bad deal for me, so I should have handled that differently, to be sure. And some of you might be surprised by this outcome. But the Minotaurs, they have impact hits each, and they have 4 attacks each, and then 3 attacks for the back rank. They ignore parry, which the ghouls didn't have, but otherwise they do ignore parry. They hit the ghouls on 3+, they wound them on 3+2, and they have battle focus, so you end up with the reroll with more hits than attacks you have. So we're going to do about, let me see, 12 plus 9, 20, 22 attacks is going to be like 22 hits. Make it 24 just for the easy counting, so that's going to be 16 wounds. Then you have the impact hits and the stomp, so that's another 4 wounds, would be 20 wounds. In a unit of 30, that's not enough to still stay sticking, because the amount of wounds you're doing back is not that great. Yeah, so this is the state of the board now. My skeletons on the right, they're stuck because of my misplay. I can't even countercharge them, so they're just stuck for a round. They did a formation change to face the wild horns, but we just let them stay as they were just for the time being. We just agreed that they had turned around. I figured that I have to do some stuff with my characters just to keep staying in the game, because I can't really afford to set up for another turn, which I already did the previous turn. So I'm kind of misplaying also this army list, and yeah, it's not going that well. I mean, I still have the Vampire Knights on the left, but my opponent kind of made the agreement with me that I would get this objective and he would consider it later. I have lost one of my courtiers, I have lost my big block of ghouls, and yeah, my units are not in the advantageous positions that I would hope they would be in. So my opponent is kind of dictating the game here by keeping the center and being quite comfortable at that. So he is ready for a charge into the skeletons with his Minotaurs, which is also a good matchup for him. He can throw in an extra chariot and just starting grinding to skeletons. I have obviously set up a counter charge with my 2 monstrous revenants and possibly also the Vampire Knights. My opponent does have a charge into the Vampire Knights with his BSB, so then he would go to the flank of the Vampire Knights. He's not going to be able to crumble them, but he's going to be able to lock them in place for at least a couple of turns, and then if needed he can try to mop them up in a different way. So he is going to go for the charges. He's going to go with the BSB into the flank of the Knights. He's going to go with the Minotaurs. They actually failed their frenzy test this turn, so he has to charge into the skeletons. and the general didn't make it into the skeletons or the knight. I believe he actually charged the knight just to be sure that he didn't get a counter charge from them, because then one of the two characters would manage. His Minotaurs on the left, they mop up my my direwolves, and the Minotaurs in the center, they reorganize to be able to have a second block that can charge in the skeletons, or at least what's going to happen at the challenge at the Minotaurs there. So he's basically setting up for a counter charge on my counter charge. And yeah, that is also a bit of a downside of vampire counts, because everything is so reliable. You can't flee, so you won't have any situations where you flee. You rally at some point, and then in a position where your opponent didn't really expect you to be. We go into combat. I think we're doing first the one with the direwolves on the left. My opponent really easily mobs up the direwolves. Basically, they were there to be mobbed up at some point, just as a delay tactic for my opponents to get to my vampire knights. And then we go into the skeletons. I'm just using dice to mark the casualties, because these Minotaurs, even though there's only 2 of them in contact with 2 full support models, so one of them is out, that doesn't get the impact hit, that doesn't get the 4 attacks, that doesn't get the storm. He still manages to do, including crumbling, I think, a total of 25 wounds. So yeah, that is a lot. That is a lot. And the funny thing about Minotaurs is that they keep going every single round of combat, like where other armies would have lances or have some other charge or first round only buffs to get them to this level of combat superiority. The Minotaurs, they just keep grinding. They keep going. So that is quite interesting for them as models. As an opponent, it's not really ideal. So if you have any ranged options to remove Minotaurs, that's great. If you don't, it's not that great. You really have to remove a lot of the Minotaurs before they get the chance to strike, because once they get going, they really excel at mowing down stuff, especially infantry. So against monsters, they suffer a little bit more, but just the amount of strength 5 attacks that comes out of them is insane. You really need something like a 1-up rerollable armor with a high resilience to be able to cope with their offensive output. And if you can combine that with a very high defense so that they only hit on 5s, then it's better, but they still have the reroll to hit. And the battle focus, so that is quite a foolproof mechanic to ensure that you will always have a decent amount of hits on your target. Yeah, so in my turn, I do counter charge with my vampire count and my vampire courtier into the Minotaurs. So these are only 5 Minotaurs, and the vampire count and the courtier together, I believe one of them fluffs a little bit, but the unit also has the +2 resilience cast on it. So it goes to resilience 6, and the vampire courtier and the count, they would have gone for paired weapons, probably, to have a lot of attacks. But now I'm kind of forced to use my lance. I still hit them easily. I still wound them now on 3+ instead of 2+. So that is still quite okay, but in the end I don't do enough wounds, to be honest, to really shine in this matchup. I had hoped to do quite some more wounds, but I was not able to. So I'm not even able to break the Minotaurs with my counter charge with the 2 characters. Yeah, and as you can expect, by this point, basically the game is over. I get an extra Minotaur unit in the flank of my vampire count. The Minotaurs in the middle, they cannot be raised back at this point because, well, there's no space for them to be raised back, but it's not really that important anymore because my opponent's centaurs, they come into the rear of my skeletons. The beast lord of my opponent joins the fight. Yeah, this is going really dark for the vampire count. Yeah, and in my previous turn, I believe I tried to charge my opponent's either the Minotaurs or the Beast Lord with my Vampire Knights. I know we were in combat. We were in combat with this Hound, and then I couldn't refrain from pursuing them. So I had to make a pursue move, giving my opponent the flank charge of my on my Vampire Knights. So that was less than ideal. And then we go into the combat of my of the Vampire Count and the Courtier on the Monstrous Revenant together with the Skeletons. Well, a quick summary of everything is that the Minotaurs had a really good lunch that day, and a lot of Skeletons died. The Vampire Count just crumbled away, and I believe the BSB even just died to attacks. So that kind of marked the end of the matchup, because I don't have any characters left in my army. So I have to. We're on turn 3 or 4. For the remainder of the game, I have to do discipline checks to see how many wounds I get on each of my units. And the Vampire Knights on the left are the only one unit left that doesn't have to check, but they're in a really bad matchup against against the Minotaurs in their flank. This was very clearly a 20-0 for my opponent, so congratulations to that. And I hope he will do the same at the tournament.